Welcome to the channel. With each passing year, the stories multiplied. Someone saw red eyes between the trees, someone heard heavy breathing behind them, someone found their animals torn apart, and the livestock, without a trace of struggle. Lugaru is dangerous. The legend was becoming increasingly tangible. Those who saw Lugaru return changed, some fell silent, some began to have strange dreams, and some vanished into the forest forever, becoming part of the mystery. Night and fog became Lugaru's allies. Who is this Lugaru? You'll find out by listening to a thrilling bedtime story. Lugaru could move almost silently, hiding in the dense foliage, while the wind and rustling leaves enhanced the feeling that the forest lived its own life. This is how the legend was born. It was not the beast that attacked without reason, but the forest defending itself through Lugaru. Every disappearance, every victim was part of a test, respect for nature or punishment for greed and ignorance. There is a place on the border of Tennessee and Kentucky where even in the daytime people avoid speaking loudly. A place where two massive lakes, Barkley and Kentucky, are separated by a narrow strip of land. On maps, it is marked as a recreational area. For tourists, it's hundreds of kilometers of forest trails and green valleys. For locals, it's land where you'd better not linger after sunset. Long before the arrival of European settlers, the Shawnee avoided these woods. The tribe's elders spoke of a shaman werewolf exiled from his village. He cursed everything around him, transforming into a beast that roamed at night. People believed the creature could change its form, sometimes a dark shadow between the trees, sometimes a beast with eyes burning red. The first white settlers laughed at these stories, but their laughter did not last long. French hunters venturing into the forest returned anxious and silent. They spoke of dark figures watching them, vanishing the moment they were noticed. Of glowing lights that seemed to lead people deeper into the thicket. And of sounds a low growl turning into a howl, that made their hair stand on end. Over time, the stories grew bloodier. Farmers found torn livestock, hunters disappeared without a trace. In the legends, a name began to appear: Lugaru. A massive wolf that walks on two legs. A creature stronger than any human and craftier than any beast. And yet, these are just legends, right? Just campfire tales told to entertain tourists. But every generation in the county knows its own stories of encounters with this creature. And each story ends the same way, with blood, screams, and a sudden silence that weighs heavier than any fear. This means that in these forests, among trails and lake shores, someone is still hunting. The land between the lakes had not yet felt the footsteps of European hunters, and the forests were impassable, dense, and full of secrets. Here ruled ancient trees, some reaching incredible heights, their canopies intertwining so tightly that sunlight barely reached the ground. The forest was a living organism. The wind rustled the leaves, old roots cracked under the weight of fallen branches, and rare animals left barely visible tracks on the soft soil. The Shawnee tribe respected this forest. For them, it was sacred. The elders told stories of the shape-shifting shaman, a being that could turn into a wolf, a bear, or even a human. According to their beliefs, this creature guarded the balance between humans and nature, appearing only when the law of the forest was broken. Do not venture into the deep thickets after sunset, the elders warned. Lugaru lives there. He sees everything. He knows the hearts of men. Young hunters listened skeptically, but fear and respect for the forest grew each day. Those who saw Lugaru returned forever changed. Some lost the gift of speech, some began to dream of forests that spoke to them. One early morning, while the mist still lay over the ground like a thick white veil, a small group of Shawnee children went to the river for water. The water babbled quietly among the stones, reflecting the first rays of the rising sun. But when they returned, one boy told that he had seen a massive creature on the riverbank. It stood on two legs, its eyes glowing red, and its fur shimmered black as night. The elders nodded, unsurprised. They knew the forest lived its own life, and Lugaru merely watched. He did not attack without reason, but every appearance was a warning. In this forest, where the air was heavy with the scent of damp earth and moss, the children learned to respect every tree, every animal. Lugaru was both terror and guardian. Although the Shawnee never tried to capture or kill Lugaru, the legends of its power were passed down from generation to generation. They said, "Whoever breaks the law of the forest will meet Lugaru." The forest remained impenetrable, full of rustlings and sounds humans could not always explain. Every morning, as the first rays of sunlight slid across the treetops, the air was filled not only with freshness but also with the premonition that a creature older than any human settlement lived here. It was in these shadows, beneath the canopy of ancient trees, that the legend of Lugaru, the guardian of the land between the lakes, was born. Europe had long forgotten the ancient forests of America, but hunters and trappers arrived here in search of furs and new lands. They traveled along narrow trails, surrounded by dense forests where every branch seemed alive and every sound a warning. Early morning in the forest. Mist hung low, like a milky veil. The sun pierced through the thick tree canopies, illuminating only small patches of the ground. The air was damp, smelling of wet leaves and moss, and the rare cries of birds sounded eerily piercing. The first group was a team of French trappers moving along the river to set traps. Ahead, one of them spotted a shadow flicker between the trees. "Stop," he said, straining his eyes into the darkness. "Who's there?" No answer, no movement. Only the light rustle of leaves. But as the men continued on, it seemed the shadow moved with them, lurking behind trees from afar. That evening, after they had set up camp, the first unexplained phenomenon occurred. Darkness suddenly fell around the fire, and the air seemed to tighten. Quiet, almost human moans echoed, and the wind stirred the branches, producing sounds that resembled footsteps. One of the trappers, the youngest, whispered, "I see eyes, red eyes among the trees." At first, the others laughed, thinking it a joke. But when their gaze fell upon the flickering lights in the darkness, the laughter died. The eyes glowed in the dense blackness, motionless, intelligent, full of watchfulness and patient menace. The elder hunter shouted, "Be careful. Do not make sudden movements." The creature emerged at the edge of the clearing, tall, covered in black fur, standing on two legs, its eyes glowing with red fire. It did not growl, it did not move quickly, but its presence pressed down on them as if the weight of the forest itself had descended upon their shoulders. The trappers did not know what it was. They were prepared for a bear, a wolf, a cougar, but not this. The creature slowly vanished into the forest, leaving only faint traces, broken branches and the crunch of fallen leaves. The next day, the stories began to spread. The trappers spoke of a man-wolf standing on two legs, watching them. They found old tracks that could belong neither to man nor beast and realized, the forest had a life of its own, and someone, or something, was guarding its secrets. From that moment, Europeans understood that the land between the lakes was not just a forest but a labyrinth of mysteries and dangers. Lugaru watched, tested, and punished. Those who ignored the Shawnee elders' warnings disappeared forever. Mist thickened both day and night, every sound was amplified, every shadow seemed to move. The feeling of being watched by the forest never left them. And thus the legends gradually took shape. Lugaru was not merely a beast, but the guardian of the forest, older than any human settlement. Its appearance was a warning and a test for those who trespassed into sacred lands. Years passed since the first Europeans entered the forest. The trail to the lakes became dangerous, rumors of Lugaru spread among settlers, and even experienced hunters whispered about strange disappearances. One October night, the wind was cold and piercing, the leaves rustling as if someone crept slowly. The moon broke through rare clouds, casting long, dark shadows between the trees. Farmer James was returning from the fields. His horse nervously clopped its hooves, and the air smelled of damp earth and fallen leaves. Suddenly, the silence was shattered by a piercing, guttural roar that made James freeze. "Who's there?" he called, but there was no answer, only the rustling of branches. Then he saw movement, a tall figure on two legs, covered in black fur, its eyes glowing like hot coals, staring directly at him. The creature was enormous, nearly 7 feet tall, resembling a wolf standing upright like a man. The horse shrieked. James tried to flee, but his legs betrayed him. Lugaru took a single step, and the ground seemed to tremble. James fell, and the beast vanished as suddenly as it had appeared. The next morning, neighbors found torn pastures and tracks too large for an ordinary wolf, deep scratches on trees, and livestock dead, their bodies ripped apart but without signs of human blood or fire. The Shawnee elders confirmed, the forest had punished those who did not respect it. These stories became lessons for anyone daring to enter the woods after sunset. Local children listened to them around the fire, flinching at every night sound. The elders said, "Lugaru watches. He is smarter than any man. He knows when you fear, and when you break the law of the forest." And so, with each generation, the land between the lakes remained sacred. Lugaru became more than a myth, he became the forest's guardian, a warning to those who forgot that nature holds a power no human should challenge. A group of students from Murray University decided to spend a weekend in the forest. They piled into an old Volkswagen van and headed straight into the heart of the land between the lakes. Young, carefree, with crates of beer and a guitar, they laughed, completely unaware that they were about to become the protagonists of one of the scariest stories from these woods. It was spring of 1973. The road led them deeper into the thicket. Trees arched over them like the vaults of an ancient temple. The asphalt gradually disappeared, leaving only a dirt track winding through the forest. Finally, they found a small clearing and decided to stop. They built a fire, spread out their food, laughed, and shared stories. Everything seemed like an ordinary camping trip, until one of the students wandered into the woods for a moment. He returned a few minutes later, pale, with a trembling voice. He said he had heard footsteps. Something, or someone, was circling him, breathing heavily. At first, the friends laughed, thinking it was a joke. But the laughter quickly faded. Now they all heard it, strange sounds. Branches snapped somewhere among the trees. Someone or something was walking around their campsite. Slowly, deliberately, like a hunter waiting for the right moment. Then, silence. And suddenly, two students noticed, in the darkness, between the trees, two red eyes glowed. They were motionless, yet full of a cold, inhuman intelligence. Fear paralyzed them. No one moved, until the air was torn by a monstrous howl, long, lupin, yet too powerful, too deep for an ordinary animal. Panic. Everyone ran to the van, slammed the doors, started the engine. But barely had the vehicle moved when something crashed into the back with such force that the passengers were thrown to the floor. Metal screeched, the body of the van groaned. It was as if enormous claws were tearing it apart. Finally, the driver floored the accelerator, and the van tore out of the clearing. Only back on campus, safe at last, did they dare to step outside. Then they saw it, the rear was mangled. For deep, parallel gashes ripped through the metal, too deep to have been made by a human. Too precise to be an accident. They had encountered something that lurks in these forests. From that day on, the legend of Lugaru sounded anew. In the summer of 1978, 17-year-old Jan Thompson visited her aunt in a small house at the very edge of the forest. The house stood at a crossroads of trails leading deep into the land between the lakes. In summer, it seemed like paradise, fresh air, a nearby lake, cicadas singing in the evenings. Jan loved coming here. She sat on the porch with her younger cousin Rhonda, while their 13-year-old brother Joe roamed the forest on his motorcycle. Everything was calm until one evening. First, they heard the engine. Joe was returning. But something was wrong. The roar of the bike was too high-pitched, as if he were pushing it to its limit. Then the motorcycle burst from the forest. Joe barely stayed on the seat, skidding to a stop at the porch and jumping off, gasping for air. A jagged tear ran down his jeans, fresh blood seeping through. Tears streamed down his face. He managed only a few words. "It attacked me, it has claws." Then a growl came from the forest. Low, animalistic, yet too deep, too heavy. The girls froze. From the darkness emerged a figure. Tall, elongated, covered in black fur. Its silhouette resembled a wolf, but it stood upright, on two legs. The house was flooded with the light of a spotlight, and the creature instantly covered its eyes with a paw, recoiling. But only for a moment. It took another step forward. Jan grabbed knives from the kitchen and dragged the children upstairs. They hid under the bed. And then the nightmare began. Outside, thuds. Claws scraping the walls. Steps slowly circling the house. Then a crash, as if something were thrown with tremendous force. Knocks at the doors, bangs at the windows. And suddenly, the sound of shattering glass. The creature had broken inside. At that moment, a car horn blared. The children's mother had returned home. The pounding suddenly stopped. The footsteps faded into the darkness. When their aunt entered, she found the kitchen window smashed and the terrified children hiding upstairs. Joe was trembling, his leg bleeding. But she listened to their account of the beast without expression, saying only firmly, "Into the forest, never again." No explanations. As if she knew more than she was willing to say. From that night on, the children understood, the legends of Lugaru were not just scary stories. They were warnings. In 1982, a terrifying story emerged on the outskirts of the land between the lakes, one that no one dared speak aloud for a long time. A typical family of four, a father, mother, and 2 children, decided to spend the weekend camping. A new RV, fresh air, a campfire, and peaceful relaxation far from the city. Everything seemed harmless. During the day, they wandered the trails, fished, and laughed. But by evening, the forest seemed to change. Twilight fell too quickly, the sounds of birds ceased, and only silence pressed on their ears. The father noticed first. He told the children not to wander fa. But it was already too late. Night brought a nightmare. At first, there was a strange scratching at the RV, as if claws were scraping metal. The father went outside with a rifle, shining a flashlight, but all he saw was a tall shadow flicker in the darkness. Eyes at roughly human height, or higher. Minutes later came a scream. Guttural, ragged, and then everything was drowned out by a roar, like a howl. The creature broke straight for the RV. Neighbors later claimed they heard horrifying sounds that night, shrieks, thuds, the screech of metal. But no one dared go outside. No one. When rangers arrived in the morning, they found a gruesome scene. The van was soaked in blood. Metal gouged by claws. Inside, the bodies of the parents and son, torn apart like toys. The daughter, a little girl, was found later. High up in a tree, hundreds of meters from the campsite. As if someone had placed her there deliberately, a grim warning. Local authorities quickly silenced the case. Newspapers published nothing. All they said. An accident. But the rumors spread instantly. People whispered that the family had been killed by the very same beast, Lugaru. It is said that the military arrived that very night, removing evidence, cleaning up the campsite. Ordinary people were left only with rumors and fear. Since then, the land between the lakes became a place few dared to enter. Because no one wants to become the next family whose night ends in the claws of the creature. That same year, another family was vacationing in the area. Fog lay thick like a carpet over the land between the lakes, hiding trails, trees, and old campsites. A light drizzle tapped on the roof of the new camper, and the forest around seemed alive, watching every movement. 15-year-old Roger, invited to spend a few days with the Levi family, stepped outside with a rifle and a tin of bait for hunting small game. The evening was quiet, only the nearby stream gurgling softly, mixing with occasional bird cries. Suddenly, a branch snapped in the forest. Roger looked up, and froze. Among the dense trees stood a massive figure, on 2 legs, covered in black, almost glossy fur, its eyes glowing red like embers. The creature moved smoothly, almost humanly, but each motion radiated power and threat. Levi! Roger shouted, but the father already held an old rifle, trying to protect the children. Lugaru lunged at Levi, but the man managed to fire. The bullets, meant for birds, barely grazed the creature, which continued moving as if unharmed. It seized Levi and killed him instantly. Roger, overcome with terror, ran to the back door of the camper. Inside he saw his mother and sister, their screams cutting through the air. The creature seemed to move almost silently, but each step thudded heavily against the ground. Roger realized that if he did not act, they would all die. He fired the rifle out the window, but Lugaru seemed impervious to pain. When it was over, Roger lay beneath the camper, inhaling the damp scent of the forest, listening to the fading steps of Lugaru. Outside, silence reigned, broken only by the gentle rain and the tapping of branches. He climbed out and ran toward the main road, his heart pounding as if it would burst. Years passed before Roger told this story again, of a creature intelligent enough to observe, analyze, and hunt. He spoke of forest trails where every step could be the last, of mist that conceals danger, of nights that live their own lives, full of rustling, breathing, and eyes glowing in the darkness. They met again in 2020. In an old bar in the town of Granville, Kentucky. Outside, a warm rain fell, thin streams running down the windows. Inside, the air smelled of beer and tobacco. At the bar sat an elderly man, around 65. A gray beard, scarred hands, eyes tired but sharp. His name was Roger. A young journalist from the local paper, Ellie, was recording his story. He had been silent for decades. But now, with every sip of whiskey, the words poured out. They said it was made up. He rasped. That the family never existed, that it was just a tourist story. But I was there. I saw it. Ellie leaned closer, the sound of the rain outside merging with his voice. It was 82. I was 27. I worked at a gas station, but on weekends I loved to go into the forest. Fishing, hunting, campfires. That time, I met a family, a man with his wife and 2 children. Normal, good people. We quickly became friends and decided to camp together. Roger stared into his glass, as if seeing that night reflected in it. The day was hot, suffocating. The sun was setting slowly, the sky painted orange. I remember the forest growing dark, as if someone draped it with a black veil. And then, silence. No birds, no crickets. Only the wind. That always means one thing. A predator is near. He fell silent, and Ellie noticed his hands trembling. I told them, "You'd better leave." But they laughed, thinking it was a scary story. Then night came. And it began. His voice dropped lower, as if he feared the beast could hear him even now. At first, a light tapping on the van. Then a scratch, like claws dragging over metal. The children cried. The father grabbed a flashlight and went out. I went too, and regretted it. The light revealed something huge. A wolf's face, elongated, eyes glowing red. Human-sized, but broader, stronger. It stood upright. And it looked at us. He closed his eyes. The father fired. I heard the shot hit, but the beast didn't flinch. It lunged, and everything mixed together, screams, howls, thuds. Claws tore metal, bones cracked. I couldn't help. I hid under the van and listened as they died. Tears glimmered in his eyes. Ellie watched, holding her breath. When it was over, Roger continued, I looked out. The van was covered in blood. The mother and son torn apart. The father, his face gone. I didn't see the girl. Only later they found her in a tree, as if the beast wanted her to be found. To frighten the rest. He fell silent, breathing heavily. The military arrived an hour later. Fast, too fast. As if they knew. They didn't ask me anything, didn't question me. They just said, you saw nothing. And I stayed silent. Until now. Ellie turned off the recorder. The bar was quiet, only the rain tapping on the roof. Roger raised his eyes, eyes filled with a fear that hadn't faded in decades. "It's still there," he whispered. "In those woods. It waits. Lugaru isn't just a beast. It's the forest's guardian, testing human arrogance. And the Shawnee legends, they weren't stories. Every attack is a test. Respect the forest and you survive, disrespect it and you disappear." Autumn, 2020. Ellie drove home after speaking with Roger. The night stretched endlessly. The rain had stopped, but the streets were still wet, asphalt glistening under the few streetlights. His words echoed in her mind, "It's still there." The next morning, she went to the local archives in an old former courthouse. Huge wooden doors creaked as she opened them. Inside, it smelled of dust and old books. A woman behind the desk eyed her suspiciously but led her to shelves containing newspapers and documents from the 1980s. Ellie flipped through yellowed pages. In 1982, no mention of the tragedy in the land between the lakes. Not a note, not a single line. But the more she searched, the stranger the findings became. Several newspaper issues were missing. Entire volumes had been carefully replaced with copies, as if someone deliberately removed the originals. She made notes, photographed pages, but felt watched. Every step echoed in the silent archive room. A few days later, she decided to speak with a former park ranger. His name was Clark, long retired. They met on the porch of his house, surrounded by dense tree canopies. Evening. Forest shadows stretched across the path. Clark listened silently, then slowly shook his head. "You're playing with fire, girl," he rasped. "We knew about 82. I was one of the first on the scene. But then, they came. Men in military uniforms. Not locals. They ordered us out and told us to tell no one. We obeyed. We had no choice." Ellie felt a chill inside. "Who were they?" she whispered. Clark looked her straight in the eyes. "I don't know. But they acted as if they'd long known about the beast. As if they were watching it." He fell silent. The wind rustled in the treetops. "I saw those bodies, Ellie," he added after a long pause. "It wasn't human. And it wasn't just an animal. It was in between. We're not talking about a wolf. We're talking about a curse." Those words stayed with her. Later, at the local library, Ellie found an old map of the land between the lakes. Strange markings, reminiscent of Native American symbols, covered the area. Zones seemed enclosed by invisible boundaries. At the center, a wolf's head symbol. She realized, this wasn't just a story about an attack. It was something ancient, rooted in Shawnee legend. Decades before the tragedy, the military already knew what lurked in these woods. Late autumn. The sky was heavy and gray, pressing down like a low vault. Yellow leaves rolled along the roads of the land between the lakes. Bare tree branches creaked in the wind. The forest stood dark and silent, as if abandoned. Ellie stepped out of her car onto the roadside. In her backpack, flashlight, recorder, map, and Roger's old notes. She had made up her mind. Days of investigation, conversations with locals, the map with symbols, it all led her here. A cold wind lifted her hair. She glanced behind her, no one. Only the road fading into the mist. "You're crazy," she whispered to herself. But she moved forward. The trail led deeper into the forest. Every step cracked twigs underfoot. Sunset approached. The sun pierced the clouds with a dim, bloody red light. The forest gradually sank into darkness. The deeper she went, the stronger the feeling that she was being watched. Leaves rustled as if under footsteps. Occasionally she glimpsed shadows, but when she blinked, they were gone. Hours later, she reached an old RV campsite. The place was abandoned, trees wrapped around rusted lamp posts, the ground littered with dry branches. According to Roger, this was where the family died in 1982. Ellie took out her recorder. Her voice trembled as she spoke. Campsite number 12. I've checked the area, no tracks. But it looks like it was abandoned in a hurry. Suddenly, a sound caught her attention. Barely perceptible, a scratch, as if claws dragged across metal. She froze, slowly turned her head. On the side of an old, rusted van were fresh scratches. Deep, parallel, like they'd been made by enormous claws. Her heart raced. The sun disappeared behind the horizon. The forest sank into twilight. Shadows thickened, almost tangible. Ellie turned on her flashlight, but the beam seemed weak in the viscous darkness. Then, she heard it. Ahead, among the trees, heavy footsteps. Slow. Matching the rhythm of her own breath. That same dead, oppressive silence Roger had spoken of. She lifted the flashlight, and in the distance, between the trees, at human height, two red eyes ignited. Ellie bolted. Branches whipped her face as she ran. Her breathing was ragged. Behind her, a growl, low, guttural, making the air itself tremble. She reached her car, hands shaking. Keys slipped to the ground. With trembling fingers, she grabbed them, leapt inside, and slammed the door. She started the engine. Headlights illuminated the road, and for a second revealed a silhouette. Massive, covered in fur, with an elongated snout and claws longer than a human hand. It stood upright, on two legs, staring directly into her eyes. Ellie slammed the gas. The car shot forward. The beast remained behind. But the sense of being watched followed her long after, even as she left the forest behind. She understood now, the legends were true. And now it knew her. Night wrapped the town in heavy, humid air. Ellie returned home from the forest. But instead of relief, she was met with a gnawing unease. Something was watching her. Outside, it was quiet. Houses slept, streetlights reflected in the wet asphalt. The wind slid across rooftops, rustling the trees. Yet Ellie heard an unusual sound, in the distance, across an empty parking lot, a faint rustling, as if someone or something was moving. She locked the door, checked the windows. Her heart raced, breath uneven. It felt as if the forest was still close, like the darkness from the land between the lakes had reached her home. She remembered the creature's eyes. Red, burning, intelligent. It knows me, Ellie thought. The phone in her hands trembled. She tried calling her parents, friends, but the line seemed dead. Only a faint static, broken by strange clicks. Then, a creak on the stairs. Slow, heavy. Her cat's scream echoed in the stillness. Ellie froze. "Who's there?" she whispered. No answer. Only the wind mixed with the rustling, growing closer. Her flashlight shook in her hand as she slowly approached the window. She peeked out. The street was empty. Only the shadows of the trees seemed strangely elongated, almost human. Then the terrible thought hit her, the beast could have left the forest. What if it knows the way? What if it's following her to the place she thought was safe? Ellie locked the basement door, grabbed Roger's old notes and the map. She understood, there would be no peaceful night. Suddenly, a low, guttural growl sounded outside, as if the ground itself trembled beneath it. It held the tone long, like a warning. Ellie froze, smelling something strange, a mix of forest moss, damp earth, and something rotting. Panic surged, but her mind knew she had to act. She decided to record everything, every sound, every step, every rustle. Proof that the legend was not dead, that Lugaru was alive and still hunting. The night stretched endlessly, each second seeming to last hours. Fear and adrenaline fused into a single, icy mixture. Then she heard footsteps outside. Heavy, slow, approaching the house. They moved not like an animal, but almost like a human. Ellie grabbed the recorder and whispered into it, "If this is my last chance, let the world know the truth." Outside, the growl repeated. Then silence. But the sense of being hunted didn't leave her. She realized, the night was only beginning. The trail quickly disappeared beneath roots and bushes. The forest became a true labyrinth. Trees stood thick, branches intertwining, forming dark tunnels. Ellie heard only her footsteps and the faint creak of twigs. From time to time, she felt a shadow flicker behind her. Thin, long, with red eyes. But when she turned, nothing. The forest seemed alive. Rustles, cracking branches, the moan of the wind, all combined into the feeling of being watched. Ellie tried to move forward, but each path led to new thickets, each clearing to a dead end. The sun fully set. Darkness fell. Her flashlight barely illuminated the nearest trees, leaving the rest in thick blackness. Then, a sound. Heavy, rhythmic steps, not quite human. Behind her, breath, hot, labored, like a predator was following. Adrenaline burned through her veins. "Lugaru," she whispered, clutching the flashlight. The shadow appeared before her. Enormous, standing on two legs, black fur, eyes red as embers. Its movements were strangely human, confident, almost cautious. It was studying her, assessing. Ellie froze, heart pounding. She stepped back, and suddenly lost her balance, falling. Lugaru slowed, sniffing the air. It knew she had surrendered, that she was afraid. "Wait," Ellie whispered, trying to gather her thoughts. "I don't want to fight. I want to understand." The beast paused. It did not attack immediately but observed. Its breathing was deep and heavy, clearly audible. Ellie pulled out the recorder, speaking softly, "I know you're real. I know people fear you. But I want to hear your story." Lugaru tilted its head, as if listening. Then it stepped aside, not attacking. It indicated a path through the forest, to an old, abandoned campsite. Ellie realized, it was not just a beast. It was a guardian, part of the legend, and she had become its witness. The fog thickened. The forest around seemed alive. Every sound, the step of the wind, the rustle of a branch, felt like a message. Ellie moved forward, heart racing, fear gradually mixing with awe. She understood, Lugaru was not merely a predator. It was a creature that protected the forest, guarding a secret humanity was not ready to comprehend. Here, in the labyrinth of the land between the lakes, Ellie felt both true respect and terror for the first time. She understood, the legend was alive. And now, she was part of it. Early morning. The sun was just beginning to rise over the land between the lakes, scattering pink-orange rays across the retreating mist. Ellie emerged from the forest. Her face was streaked with wet leaves, her hands scratched, her breath heavy, but her eyes burned with fire. She had survived, and she had seen what no one should ever see. Returning to the town, she carried the recorder, Roger's notes, the map, and photos of the old claw marks on the van. She seemed to bring back evidence, but the forest did not release her so easily. On every road she drove, unease lingered. Shadows of the trees seemed to reach toward her car, the wind rustled the leaves, creating the sense that the forest was watching. Ellie began deciphering Roger's recordings and her own notes. Gradually, she understood, Lugaru was only part of a much older secret. On the map, among the ancient native symbols, other locations were marked with similar signs. Each one was a potential site where mystical creatures guarded forests, lakes, and rivers. She realized, the land between the lakes was a kind of power nexus, a place where legends become reality, and tales of beasts were only the visible part of a vast mystical system. At that moment, it dawned on her, Lugaru was not merely a predator. He was a guardian, a guide, a keeper of ancient knowledge. He chose whom to scare, whom to protect, and whom to leave alive. Ellie, a journalist, had always been fascinated by mysticism. She had brought the recorder, Roger's old notes, the map with mysterious symbols, and a laptop for taking notes. Every sound, cracking branches, rustling leaves, the cries of birds, made her heart race. First, she spoke with locals who remembered the old stories. They described red eyes among the trees, strange nighttime sounds, hunters and livestock disappearing. Lugaru lives here, an elderly woman said, shivering in the cold. He tests those who break the forest's law. Don't think it's just a story. We have seen him ourselves. Ellie felt a mixture of dread and awe. She decided to walk through the forest where Roger had described his encounters. In the evening, she reached an old bridge over a lake. Light rain tapped her cloak, the wind whispered through the treetops. The fog surrounded her, giving the impression that the forest was alive, watching, breathing. She stopped at the edge of a clearing and heard a soft crack of twigs behind her. The wind carried the scent of damp fir. Ellie froze. Her heart hammered. For a moment, red eyes flashed through the thick foliage, and vanished. She switched on the recorder, capturing the sound of the wind, cracking branches, and the calls of owls. She felt Lugaru nearby, observing, testing her. Deep down, she knew that to uncover the truth, she would have to take risks. The next day, she met with a retired park ranger who had once patrolled these lands. He showed her old tracks, deep claw marks on trees, and places where animals had vanished. "Don't laugh," he said. "This is not a fairy tale. This forest is protected by ancient forces, and Lugaru is their guide. He is smarter than any human, he knows when you are afraid, when you lie, or when you cross the boundaries." Ellie recorded everything, every sound, every emotion. She knew that on YouTube, this would be captivating: misty roads, the forest, mysterious tracks, red eyes in the darkness, the fear felt by anyone who enters these woods. By evening, she decided to follow a trail to an old clearing, where Lugaru was rumored to appear most often. The fog thickened, the air grew cold. Every tree seemed to watch her, every shadow a potential threat. Then she heard it, a heavy, muffled step, a sound that could not belong to any ordinary animal. Her heart jumped. She looked toward the shadow, and met eyes. Red, intelligent, seemingly scanning her soul. Ellie realized. Lugaru was not merely a beast. He was the forest's guardian, a living sentinel, a being capable of understanding humans and punishing the slightest folly. It was imperative for her to see him, to try to understand. The fog was dense and cold, each step on the wet path accompanied by the crunch of fallen leaves. Ellie moved cautiously, holding her camera and recorder, hearing every sound: the sudden snap of a branch, a falling pine cone, a soft creak beneath her foot. Her heart raced as if every creature in the forest could hear it. Suddenly, she heard steps, heavy, yet nearly silent, as if the beast was pacing cautiously. Ellie froze, listening. Red eyes flashed among the trees. "Lugaru," she whispered, holding her breath. The creature slowly emerged into the clearing. Enormous, standing on two legs, its fur glistening from the rain, eyes glowing like embers. It moved without haste, each motion deliberate, almost human, but terrifying to the core. Ellie felt fear clutch her chest, but she knew she could not run. She switched on her flashlight, aiming it at the figure. Lugaru paused, as if evaluating her. He did not growl, he did not leap, but his presence was palpable, oppressive, as if the forest itself had taken shape in this guardian. The wind howled, the rain intensified, drops pelting her face and the camera helmet. Ellie stepped back slowly, recording every movement of Lugaru. The creature advanced gradually, its eyes never leaving her. Then she heard a crack to the right. Lugaru's head snapped toward the sound, his body tensed. Ellie realized, the forest was testing her patience, her ability to read the darkness and the sounds. She began to retreat slowly along the trail, camera raised, capturing every second. The red eyes vanished into the dense fog, leaving only the sense of presence. But Ellie knew, he was still near. She could hear his breathing, heavy and measured, mingling with the noise of rain and wind. When she reached the open space by the lake, the fog began to dissipate, but the forest remained full of rustling sounds. Ellie understood, Lugaru was not just a beast. He lived in this forest, he was part of it, and every encounter was a test of human courage and intellect. That night would remain forever in her memory: rain, fog, eyes glowing like embers, and fear, paralyzing yet inspiring respect. Ellie knew, her mission had only just begun. Lugaru watched, the forest observed, and now she had become part of this mystical story. Early morning in the land between the lakes. Mist still clung to the trails, and raindrops hung from the branches like the forest's tears. Ellie sat at an old table in the small town library, surrounded by manuscripts, maps, and yellowed newspaper clippings. Each page told of encounters with Lugaru. Missing hunters, torn livestock, glowing red eyes in the dark, heavy breathing, and footsteps that could not be attributed to any ordinary creature. "I knew he was real," Ellie whispered to herself. "And now I need to understand who or what he is." She opened an old map marking the locations of disappearances and sightings. The points formed a strange network, as if Lugaru patrolled the area according to strict, unseen laws. Late that evening, she met an elderly hunter who had seen Lugaru in his youth. His hands trembled, and his voice barely held back fear. "He's not a beast," he said. "He's smarter than all of us. He walks like a man, observes, tests. And if you break the forest's law you vanish." Ellie recorded every word, sensing the forest echoing her thoughts. The rain grew heavier, the mist thickened, and even indoors, it felt as if the forest were creeping inside. "But why does he attack people?" she asked. "He doesn't attack," the hunter replied. "He tests. Those who are greedy, those who destroy, those who forget to respect the forest, they pay the price." Over the following days, Ellie spoke with several witnesses. Each recounted stories, missing friends, strange sounds, eyes tracking every movement, heavy footsteps no one could replicate. Ellie began connecting the events. Lugaru was not merely a creature, he was a guardian, testing humans and their actions. He did not kill without reason, but each violation of the forest's law was recorded, and punishment came swiftly. Finally, studying old Shawnee manuscripts, she found mentions of a shape-shifting shaman who guarded the forest, warned humans, and punished those who disrespected it. All the legends aligned. Lugaru was the modern embodiment of this ancient forest spirit. She needed to show the world that the forest lived, that Lugaru was not a myth, but a part of nature, capable of judgment, punishment, and protection. That night, she returned to the trail to record the forest sounds. Mist, rain, rustling branches, the breath of the forest, all became part of her investigation. She felt Lugaru nearby, watching, evaluating her courage. And she knew, the story of Lugaru was far from over. It was just beginning. Once again, Ellie walked toward the old clearing where Lugaru was rumored to appear most often. Her heart pounded as if trying to escape her chest. Every sound, the snap of a branch, the rustle of leaves made her flinch and freeze. Suddenly, a soft yet heavy step echoed through the dense mist. Ellie stopped. Before her, like the shadow of the night itself, emerged Lugaru. His eyes glowed red, and his tall, sleek body, covered in black fur, seemed a blend of wolf and man. He moved slowly, yet each motion radiated power and control. Ellie felt her breath quicken, her hands tremble, but she knew she could not show fear. The camera captured every moment, every gaze, every detail. "You came here to understand," she whispered to herself. "But you don't know what you're facing." Lugaru stepped forward. Rain slid off his fur like a river of darkness, and each step echoed in Ellie's chest like a dull hammer. He did not growl or attack, yet the pressure of his presence was tangible. The forest itself seemed to constrict the space around her. Ellie slowly retreated, keeping her eyes fixed. Suddenly, a loud snap of branches came from the right. Lugaru's head snapped toward the sound, his eyes flaring brighter. Ellie realized the forest was testing her courage and respect. At that moment, she heard a faint breath behind her. Two figures emerged from the mist, possibly two Lugarus. Ellie understood, retreat was impossible, she had to act. She switched her flashlight directly onto the figures. The light tore them from the fog, revealing the full size and power of the creatures. One of the beings froze, watching her. Fear gripped her heart, but she continued recording every sound, every movement. The wind howled, the rain intensified, the mist seemed alive. Lugaru took a slow step back and vanished into the dense forest as suddenly as he had appeared, leaving behind silence, the scent of wet earth, and the crackling of fallen branches. Ellie stood alone, trembling with adrenaline and fear, but with a full understanding, she had encountered a living legend. That night would remain etched in her memory: mist, rain, forest, red eyes, heavy breathing, footsteps, and a fear that both paralyzed and commanded respect. The morning after her encounter with Lugaru was heavy. Ellie sat in a small inn on the edge of the land between the lakes. The rain had stopped, but the mist still hung low over the water like a ghostly veil. She opened her laptop, connected the camera and recorder. Each movement of the mouse felt slow, heavy, as if nature itself was holding her attention. On the screen flashed red eyes in the night, the crackle of branches, raindrops, and the flicker of flashlight beams. Ellie reread the witness reports. Farmers, hunters, tourists, all said the same thing: Lugaru tests humans, not without reason, but his presence is always felt as a threat. This is not just a legend, she whispered to herself. This is a living being, part of the forest. Next, Ellie met the final witness, a retired forest ranger named Thomas. His house stood at the forest's edge, wooden, smelling of resin and old books. He showed her old maps and journals documenting disappearances of people and livestock. "See these lines?" Thomas said, pointing to the map. "These are Lugaru's routes. He guards the territory, and anyone who breaks its laws receives a warning." Ellie recorded every word. Her fingers trembled from excitement and fatigue, but she understood she was uncovering the truth. That evening, she returned to the clearing where she had seen Lugaru, to film the final footage. The fog enveloped the trees once again, rain dripped from branches, and the forest whispered at the edge of hearing. Ellie turned on the camera, taking slow panoramic shots: the empty clearing, the flickering flashlight, a shadow that could only be a legend. Suddenly, somewhere in the forest, the snap of a branch. Lugaru's red eyes flashed for a moment among the trees. Ellie felt a mixture of fear and awe. The camera captured every movement, every glance. She knew this would be a video no one would forget. Lugaru stepped aside, then vanished, leaving only the whisper of wind and tremors in the earth. Ellie remained alone, trembling, heart overflowing with emotion. She understood, Lugaru was not a beast, not a myth, but the forest's guardian, living by its own laws. Her mission was to show this truth to the world. Ellie grasped the key lesson: the legend of Lugaru was alive. Anyone entering the forest without respect would feel his presence. But those who approached with understanding and caution could emerge unscathed, carrying only the memory of a living legend. Have you heard similar stories? Do you believe they could actually happen? Let us know in the comments. It's interesting to read and hear your opinion.